this is Jay Mitchell, and we are back with another episode of the Libertarian Uncensored podcast, going over all the posts on the Libertarian Uncensored subreddit. Let's get right into it. So first we have reminding everyone again, posted by CDN History Student, and that's a cross post from the Gen Z subreddit. And it's that one of those memes from The Office. It's a guy pointing to the whiteboard. He says, trans people aren't the reason you can't afford eggs, healthcare, or home. And then ... you're focused on the wrong 1%. And I would agree with that. Economic issues and social issues do often come from different impetuses. I would consider most Republican voters are people who care more about economic issues, and most Democrat voters tend to be people who more care about social issues from personal experience. But with that being said, I think people don't really care for the shitty economy, but I think people are very much tired of the culture war as well, and the whole transgender circle jerk. If you want to identify as whatever you want, if you want to identify as transgender, transracial, trans age, trans species, transhuman, I think you should be able to do so, but that doesn't mean other people should be forced to agree with how you identify. Identify as this is very much a libertarian position. Identify as however you want to, but don't force other people to agree with that if they don't feel like it. Then we have, today's migrants are just like your immigrant great-grandparents from Reason.com by FlimsyOwl5563. And yeah, I personally, I'm fine with immigration. I think if immigrants want to come over. But that being said, a lot of your immigrant great-grandparents probably came here legally, while a lot of today's immigrants come here illegally. I personally don't think there should be any immigration laws at all from a libertarian perspective. But in the era of the welfare state and government benefits, I do think the government should be trying to restrict some immigration, if just not get overcrowded with welfare queens and all that. And yeah, I personally, I'm fine with immigration, but as long, but a lot of the immigrants coming over, they're not good people. They're people like the gang members, MS-13, and I don't really care for that. And also, move wherever you want to, but just because, I think a lot of immigration destroys cultural homogeneity. I think that's why a big reason why things are so tense right now, because our culture is, we increasingly have all these people coming over, and we don't know what to do with them. And yeah, so I personally, as I say, I can see a lot of arguments for an anti-immigration stance, but I'm personally more on the pro side. So with that being said, ultimately, I think it doesn't really matter too much. As long as people leave each other alone, I think that's very much a libertarian position. Leave each other alone and have voluntary association rather than forced association. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have, I thought the plan was to get rid of wasteful spending from Donald Key, and that's across from the Facepalm subreddit. And that's an article. People are questioning why Donald Trump left Super Bowl so early after it cost $20 million for him to attend. And yeah, that's kind of a drop in the bucket compared to all the federal spending combined. But they're just going to spend on frivolous stuff regardless of who's in power. Trump, they might be saving a lot of money with the Department of Government Efficiency. But, Stone tossed it a good comic recently where Elon gave Trump's a big bag of money. He says, here's all the money we saved from the Department of Government Efficiency, and he gives Trump says thanks, and then he walks it right over to Israel. So they'll find a way to piss away money regardless of who's in power, and that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have Trump deposits enforcement of law banning bribery of foreign officials from CNBC.com by Legio X. And yeah, I don't really care for bribery, but I think if people want to partake in bribery, they should be able to do so. But yeah, ultimately the government's going to justify whatever law it wants to. I think, it doesn't really matter. If people want to be corrupt, it doesn't matter what the laws are. They'll justify their corruption regardless of what the laws are. So I personally really don't think this is that big a deal. Then we have U.S. Justice Department tells prosecutors to drop Eric Adams' case from BBC.com by Flimsy L5563. And yeah, I think, if they want to drop the mayor of New York City's case, they should be able to. I think it might be a quid pro quo to get ICE operating afoul with impunity in New York City. But ultimately people will justify whatever they want to justify. And yeah, if the good Justice Department does want to drop the Eric Adams case, I think they should be able to do so. I think he's probably corrupt. I think they're pretty much all corrupt, so I don't think it really matters too much. Then we have judge orders HHS, CDC, and FDA to restore deleted web pages with health information from CBSNews.com by Baton 13. And yeah, I personally don't really think the legal system should be telling people what they can and can't post online. I think the libertarian position does not have any government web pages at all. And yeah, I think if people want to make government web pages, they should be able to do so, but there shouldn't be any official government web pages because the government shouldn't be telling people what they can and can't do. And yeah, I don't think pretty much anyone really uses government websites that much. So I think if you have a fiscally conservative argument for getting rid of them as well, and that's another reason libertarians should probably be against them. Then we have judge told Trump and Musk to follow the law for a week. They're calling it tyranny from AboveTheLaw.com. And that was posted by Donald Key. And yeah, ultimately Trump is in the position to make and enforce the law, and so is Musk by his association with Trump. So yeah, I personally don't care for the increasing judicial activism of the courts, but ultimately it is a system of checks and balances. A lot of progressives, they said, oh, the Supreme Court's illegitimate when it ruled against them. So it's really just who's in the in group, who's in the out group. People will justify what they justify. It doesn't really matter what people say or not. And yeah, if they just want to go against what the courts say, I think they should be able to do so. The courts, as Andrew Jackson famously said, Marshall made his decision, let them enforce it. The courts can say whatever they want to, but they don't have any enforcement mechanisms. And that's increasingly, in an era where the government's very divided, you have to ask yourself who can enforce what. And yeah, and increasingly people will just justify whatever they justify. It doesn't really matter who's in a position of authority or not. And yeah, that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have Musk crashes Trump interview and goes on an info dump about how the judicial branch shouldn't exist, and that's a cross post from the law subreddit. And yeah, I don't really care for that. I think it's only going to make them look bad if they go against the judicial branch. But a lot of progressives, as I said earlier, they were against the judicial branch and said the Supreme Court was illegitimate when it ruled against them. So ultimately, it just they justify saying whatever you want to. If you want to go against the judicial branch, you should be able to. I personally think we just need to just get rid of all three branches of the government. Each of them is authoritarian in its own way. One of them, the legislative branch, tries to pass all the laws, and the president enforces the laws, and the judicial branch, is kind of the judge who determines the laws are constitutional or not. And yeah, each of those are authoritarian in their own way. So I think, if they want to infight amongst themselves, I think that's probably good from a libertarian position. If they're going after each other, they can't go after you. And yeah, that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have Elon Musk will decide the fate of Social Security and Medicare. Time to panic. From the newsglobe.net, from Ragnar OKXG, and that's crosswords from the Anything Goes News subreddit. And yeah, I personally don't really care for either of those programs. But I think if taxpayers want to voluntarily fund them, they should be able to do so, but they shouldn't be forced to fund them if they don't want to. So I personally would get rid of those, but I think it should be up to the people rather than just Elon Musk. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have Texas GOP lawmakers introduce bills to display 10 Commandments, read Bible in schools from thehill.com by Dr. Who 07. And yeah, I personally think, if the schools want to justify having the 10 Commandments and Bible in there, I think they should be able to do so. They might say, the retort might be, oh, they're public schools, but I think that's a pretty good argument to get rid of public schools altogether, because, ultimately people will justify what they justify, and I don't think the government should be throwing money at schools, especially because, that allows them to control them and what is taught in them. And yeah, that's why I think, the government shouldn't be running schools. The people should be running schools to see how they see fit. I personally do think, you should have separation of church and state, but I do think we need to have separation of education and state on top of that. So I think that's very much the libertarian position. Then we have White House blocks AP from event for using Gulf of Mexico. Fuck free speech from WKNFM.org by CH Relax. And yeah, I personally think if the White House wants to block whoever they want to, they should be able to. I also think it's interesting that, if you want to call it the Gulf of Mexico, call it the Gulf of Mexico. If you want to call it the Gulf of America, call it the Gulf of America. A lot of progressives say, "Oh, I don't like dead naming," but they love to do that when the name change they don't like happens, like with the Gulf of America or Gulf of Mexico. Call it whatever you want to. I really don't care. And yeah, that's my thoughts on that issue. Do justify calling it whatever you want to, and you should have the freedom of association to block whatever groups you want to from coming to your events as well. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have Trump State Department officials repeatedly calls for mass sterilization of low IQ trash from independent.co.uk by Swamp Yankee Dan. And yeah, I personally don't think low IQ trash should be forcibly sterilized. But with that being said, most Redditors seem to be doing it voluntarily these days. They had free vasectomies at the DNC convention and all that. So, I think voluntarily sterilization is the future rather than forced sterilization. I personally wouldn't sterilize myself, but if you want to sterilize yourself, you should be able to do so. Then we have I will bring down inflation on day one from CH Relax, and that's a post from Betty Bowers on Blue Sky. I'll bring down inflation on day one, and that's a picture of a Trump True Social Stove, Biden inflation up. And yeah, ultimately, I do think inflation, the government can't control inflation. Well, they could control inflation if they stop printing so much money, but regardless, it's always going to be the out group who's responsible for it and never the in group. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have voters are right about the economy. The data was wrong from Politico.com by Color Monochrome. And yeah, I would agree with that. Data these days is just going to be used to push an agenda rather than to actually inform people. And that's how, a lot of Democrats during the last election were going, "Oh, the economy is so good right now." When in reality, everyone realized it was shit and they were just being gaslighted otherwise. So yeah, you believe whatever you want to, because a lot of times the official narrative doesn't always end up being correct. And yeah, that's my thoughts there. Then we have Trump humiliated in most powerless image ever of U.S. President O'Donnell from DailyBeast.com, posted by Donald Key. And yeah, that's another photo of Musk getting behind Trump's desk at the White House. And yeah, this is just kind of Trump derangement syndrome living rent free in your head. But yeah, if you want to think he's powerless compared to Elon, you should be able to do so. I personally think their partnership has been pretty beneficial for both of them. So, I think that I would continue on with it if I were them. But yeah, if you want to think he's Elon's puppet, that's on you. Then we have to lower the prices of eggs. We're now renaming Greenland from Congress.gov by CH Relax, and that's a new House bill to rename Greenland to Red, White, and Blue Land. I think they said it was going to be called. But yeah, ultimately I don't really care for all the neo-imperial bullshit that the U.S. is doing. But it's people only care because they're in the out group rather than the in group. They love all the intergovernmental organizations like the UN and the International Criminal Court who do a lot of neo-imperial, neo-colonial bullshit as well. But it's okay since they're in the in group rather than the out group. And yeah, I think we're gonna wrap it up there. I'll see you guys in the next episode. Bye.